Committee member Greg Bendel, Selectman Bendel, told me that he had a conflict tonight, so he said that he might either be late or not able to attend. All right, so I'll open the Senior Center Building Committee. We're at 6:02. I'll read into the minutes. This meeting of the Wilmington Senior Center Building Committee is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Members of the public who would like to participate in the meeting can do so by using the Zoom call-in feature via telephone by dialing 1-646-558-8656 and enter the meeting ID 835-1066-8388. Then press the pound sign and press the pound sign again at the next voice prompt. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the meeting designated for public comment. By following the steps previously noted, press *9 on the telephone keypad. This will notify the meeting host that the caller wishes to speak. In the event that despite our best efforts, we are not able to provide real-time access, we'll post a record of this meeting to the town's website as soon as possible. Well, welcome everybody.
Good evening.
First item on the agenda is call to order, so I'll take a roll call. I'll call your name and just respond with an aye. Diane Allen.
Aye.
Paul Malorani.
Aye.
Jack Holloway.
Aye.
Teresa Manganelli.
Aye.
Terry Marciello.
Aye.
I already spoke about Greg Bendel. George Hooper. Aye. Did I miss anybody? Also with us tonight, Town Manager Jeff Hull, OPM Dan Pallotta, our designer Lee Morissette, and Grant Rocco, and taking minutes is Rebecca. All right. Second item on the agenda, everybody's had the opportunity to review the minutes. Everybody received them, had a chance to review them. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I would entertain a motion to accept.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, so Teresa Manganelli made the motion. Was that Jack? Did you second that?
Yes.
Seconded by Jack Holloway. I'll take a roll call vote on that. We'll do the same thing. Diane Allen.
Yes.
Paul Malorani.
Yes.
Jack Holloway.
Yes.
Teresa Manganelli.
Yes.
Terry Marciello.
Yes.
And George Hooper, aye. Yes. All right, an update on the site selection at the January 10th Selectmen's meeting. The Selectmen had voted to recommend approval of the committee's site selection of the St. Dorothy site. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. We'll have the next item on the agenda. I'll put it out to Lee. This will be for discussion of adjacencies, building layout on the site. Lee?
Thank you very much, George. Good evening, everyone, and members of the public. It's great to be back again, and very happy with our last meeting that we had. Looking forward to our next steps, and I've got a little something to share with you all. First, a little housekeeping. Grant is joining us, and he's on mute and observing because he's tuning in from home. So if you have any questions, you can direct them to me. If I'm thoroughly stumped, maybe I'll tap Grant, but we're going to leave him alone. So the second bit of housekeeping that I would like to go over, and Dan, we haven't discussed this, but I want to be completely transparent with the committee, that Marco is, I'm sad to say, no longer on the team. He's actually left Dietz and Company for a fantastic new opportunity elsewhere here in the Valley. So he'll leave some big shoes to fill. I'm a little taller, so maybe it'll be all right. But I'll be stepping in as the chief designer and the principal in charge on the project moving forward. I have all of his notebooks, so best I can parse out his notes, I will do that. If I've missed anything that you guys talked about with him, just let me know, and I'll apologize in advance and make sure we can move forward. So best wishes to him and his next step in his career. We're really excited for him.
We did have a couple of one-on-ones with the director,
Mhm.
and I'm sure the notes are in the notebook, but I don't think it would hurt for you to do the same, just to
Great.
maybe a phone call to go over the items that were really important to the director to
Mhm.
make sure that we don't miss something.
Yeah, I actually look forward to that conversation. So Terry, let's catch up soon.
All right, great.
Maybe,
Thank you, Lee.
yeah, maybe once you see these plans, you'll have some additional comments we can
Mhm.
discuss. That's it for housekeeping for me. Any questions before I get started?
Lee, I will say that I did send this presentation out to everybody, so they have had the opportunity to look at it. But please, of course, go over there. I have a few questions of my own, and I'm sure they're.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And this will be available to you digitally, or has been, pardon me, available to you digitally. I also, due to a miscalculation on my behalf, I was over prepared for this meeting and printed out 10 copies, thinking it was in person. I was in Cambridge for another project today, so I just kind of popped on by the town hall. So Jeff, you should have a good 10 copies sitting on your desk now.
I do.
Oh, excellent.
That was good.
So Terry, there'll be some extras for you to bring over to the senior center, hopefully. And if anyone wants to stop in, Jeff has some copies. I know I like to sketch some notes on things as I work.
Terry,
So-
use those outreach.
That's right.
Yes, I will. I will.
All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Let's see. Do I have that option?
Yes, you do.
Let's see. Share screen. The big green button in the middle. Yes.
Yes.
Let's give this a try. Nope, not that one. Not that one. That one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to present full screen over here. There we go. And it's on this monitor over here, so I'm not looking away. I'm just looking at my other screen here. Full transparency. Okay, little preview of tonight, my portion of tonight's show at least. The agenda, we'll do a very quick recap on site selection. I'll review the summary of spaces that we had previously discussed from, it's been months now, so I want to refresh everyone's memory. Go over a little bit on the space planning that we've already done, again, to refresh memories before we get through that site selection process. And then we have some new plan diagrams to share with you. Grant and I have been working very closely over the past couple of weeks, and we're excited about this. We've got a couple of options that we want to walk through, and I'm sure that'll be the majority of our discussion. And then I do want to go through next steps because things are going to really speed up, which is why I'm excited about our bi-weekly schedule moving forward. And then we have that one more thing at the end, which is a little bit of historic Wilmington. And that's where I'm going to be doing a call for you guys to help me out a little bit on context. So site selection. We're at St. Dorothy's. As I drove by today, it's looking beautiful in the trees. I think, yeah, this is all review. So as a reminder, this is the preferred site test fit that we did. It's up on the street, on Main Street, with the parking behind it, internal to the site. The entrance is to the north. So up on the screen is north in this case. So entrance is to the north of the building and then swing around to the right facing east. There's an exterior patio space facing south and just some block-in kind of potential for outdoor activities adjacent to the building. And there's also potential for outdoor activities adjacent to the parking as well. This is really just a test fit. So future expansion potentially next to the street as well. I'm reminding you because we're going to zoom in and we're going to keep the orientation the same. So up will be north and right will be east and all that kind of thing as we zoom in. So just keep the site in mind because the screen's only so big. We can only fit so many things on. Okay. All right, summary of spaces. So this is the text version of the summary of spaces, and we've taken all of your comments and previous notes and updated this so that we got rid of things that were superfluous or that you didn't want, and we made sure to include the things that you did want. So you can review this in more detail in the paper format or the digital format. If you have any comments, I'm happy to hear them. But when you get through these, just a thing to point out, we're going to keep these colors consistent between the plan and the summary of spaces. So entry sequence will stay green. The administrative suite will stay this terracotta kind of color. The activities will be this light blue color, and support spaces will generally be a light gray. And we'll use that as a key so that you can begin to correlate these, the spreadsheet to the plan. The outdoor spaces we put as green, and it's below the line anyway. It's not really enclosed space. So that's not part of the gross square footage. But gross square footage comes out to about 18,000 square feet. And the diagrams I'm going to show you tonight are actually about 18,000 square feet. So they're a pretty good test fit. So space planning. This is a review, so I'll make it quick. This is a graphic representation of the previous slides. All of the parts and pieces are here, and they're all in the same, they're in a real size. They're to scale to each other. And so this is unorganized, and this is organized. This is the plan adjacencies, where we are describing how we want things to be adjacent to each other or not adjacent to each other. And you might remember we have on the right more active, louder type spaces, and on the left more quiet, restful kind of spaces, if you will. And the idea there is you don't want to put something really loud like the exercise room right next to the library or the game room if you're having a board game night. There's lots of adjacencies here. I'm not going to go through them because we've already talked about them, and we're going to talk about them in a little bit more real way in this next step. But this diagram directly informs our next thing. So if we go from a loose association of spaces to a preferred association of spaces, and now we move into something that begins to look a little like a building. So we have two plan diagrams, and we deliberately named them number 1 and 2. It could have been A and B. We'll make more, but just in order to keep track of which one's which, we have plan diagram 1 and plan diagram 2. The spaces you see here are colored like we talked about, and are in their rough, they're actually pretty accurately sized to that plan diagram from the summary of spaces before. So we've begun to group things, and I think that's something to note. If you look at these plan diagrams, we have plan diagram 1 and plan diagram 2. And as you begin to look through them, and with an eagle eye, you'll find that spaces are not represented. You might say, well, where are the companion bathrooms? They're actually assumed into other spaces. So we've begun to group spaces together based on the plan adjacencies that we talked about previously. So for example, the fitness room and the exercise equipment room both have their appropriate associated storage rooms within them. So for the purposes of easy design, we've grouped all of the support spaces together. For example, the kitchen has the kitchen's office and storage and that kind of thing. And so forth. As a result, we can begin to think of the plan as kind of four things, really, maybe 5. 1, admin, so a suite of offices, has conference rooms and office space in it and all that kind of stuff, but it's really a chunk of administrative space. We have a dining function space with the adjacent kitchen, which is really kind of a chunk because we really don't want to take those apart. They want to be next to each other. We have the quiet stuff and the loud stuff. Not pejorative being loud. I like being loud, but the quiet stuff is arts and crafts, maybe not the workshop, that might get a little noisy, the game room, recreation, and potentially the meeting room and classroom. So those are kind of the quiet activities. And so they're on the other side of the hall, excuse me, on the other side of the hall from the dining and function space and in their own wing. And then the noisy stuff is, well, in this case, it's the exercise and equipment room and the fitness room. And so those are as far from the recreation game space as possible. But the point of this particular diagram is that it closely represents the basic massing that we described in the preferred feasibility site test fit. For example, excuse me, we have the entry on the upper right-hand corner. And remember, north is up in this case, and the parking lot would be to the right. So as you come in, the drop-off would be at the entry here in the northeast corner. Admin would be adjacent to the entry in order to control circulation as people come in, so a place to check in, eyes on the street, that kind of thing. And then immediately when you come in, the lobby is adjacent to the kitchen, and adjacent to the kitchen and the lobby is the cafe. And in this diagram, we've pushed the cafe around the corner from the entry lobby a little bit so that it has the absolute best seating for the view out onto the terrace. This is something, Terry, I understand you spoke to Marco about. You said, wouldn't it be awesome if, and I'm paraphrasing, wouldn't it be awesome if you went in the front door and you went directly out to the outdoor space? So we were trying to pull that off with this diagram. Not only do we want to go straight through the front door to the outdoor space, we want that outdoor space to be kind of the point of the building. Like if you had to sum it up, this building is about this three-sided courtyard, and everything this building does reinforces that outdoor space as an essential part of the building. It is essentially another room of the building. It's just an outdoor room. So in this case, the best way for a courtyard to work well is to get good solar orientation. It faces due south. So it's just going to be flooded with light. That light, color, and temperature will change throughout the day. So in the mornings, the light will glance across. Midday, it'll be full of light, and in the afternoon and evening, it will come over the top of the recreation spaces. The gallery, we call it gallery instead of just a corridor, because in this case, it's going to be activated with the cafe, with soft seating, with people with coffee, tea. Maybe we'll even include bookshelves along the windows or along the back of the cafe. So this is a really informal, casual space of gathering. It's the point of the building. It's the place you want to go. And then from either side of the gallery cafe, you've got the men's and women's room and the exercise rooms. And then the other side is the arts and crafts and recreation spaces. And this cafe is directly in front of the dining room. And that is so that the cafe acts as a pre-function and post-function space for the dining room. If there's a big thing that's happening and people want to gather before they go in, they can do that. Or if the dining room is not functioning, then the cafe is kind of the place people come to. I'm going to leave it at that, and we'll go to the next one. And then maybe we can, George, it's up to you how you want to structure this. Maybe we can do questions after that.
Okay.
So in a nutshell, and by nutshell, I have little diagrams on my wall here. These are diagrams we drew for ourselves to describe what's the difference between scheme A and scheme B, or I'm sorry, scheme 1 and scheme 2. Scheme 1 is centrally focused. It's all about the courtyard. It faces in. Everything surrounding the courtyard is deliberately put there. Fitness could open onto the courtyard. The gallery could open onto the courtyard with big open glass doors, maybe. The meeting space looks out onto the courtyard deliberately to the east to get direction. So it's kind of a passive connection, view connection. The recreation space could literally open onto the courtyard if we wanted to. And then arts and crafts gets more northern light, all those kinds of things. But it's about focusing on the courtyard. I'll stop blabbering on. Scheme 2. This plan diagram is about, well, to be honest, it's a direct translation of the, what do we call that? Plan adjacency diagram. We were looking at the plan adjacency diagram and we thought, well, actually, that works really well. What if we put the entry right across from the courtyard terrace? So if you came in the front door, you'd go right across the main hallway and straight out onto the terrace. So this is an even tighter description, Terry, of what you had said. So in this case, instead of the courtyard being the point, this entry sequence is really the point. I can imagine the entry, lobby, cafe, gallery, terrace being one tall space that's connected all the way across the building. The other benefit of this scheme is it has a very short amount of corridor length. You're not very far from anything at any point. You can see I'm waving my arms. I should use my cursor. On the right, there's a little alcove before you get into the exercise and equipment. So the right side is the noisy side in this case. Exercise and equipment and fitness area, and the dining, that's got a little alcove. On the left side is the quieter stuff. So admin, offices, meeting space. You'll actually notice this is exactly the same wing on the left side. So it's not a completely different plan. It's just mostly different. But instead of the admin being on the right side in the previous scheme, it's kind of in the northwest corner of the building. So this is kind of right up the middle. Like, let's just, there's no surprise. This is in the front door and you get this big view straight through the building, straight outside. to the terrace. Another thing to point out about this diagram is you see the ends of the halls look straight out of the building. So you come in and you look straight out through the glass. When you get to the gallery or the main corridor, if you look left or right, you see straight through the building and out through again to the outside. This is really an important feature to make a building feel connected to the exterior and to make it feel light and airy and open. It gives a very open feel to a building. Whenever there's a corridor and you look down the end of the corridor, if you can see out rather than just taking a right or left hand turn, it gives the feeling of being very open. It's kind of the opposite of town hall. When you go into town hall and the corridor curves around, it feels very closed. You can't really see outside at all. This is the exact opposite. So in this way, this diagram is very outward focused, whereas the previous diagram was all about the courtyard. I think that's probably a good place to stop for me, because I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, I think I'll start. You touched upon it. It was the companion bathrooms. I noticed right away that you only had the two, but also I want to make sure that they're not traveling a long distance also to get. So if I was in the game room, I didn't want it to travel that whole distance. So I'm sure you're taking that into consideration.
Yes.
And
Whatever.
also,
yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Your point on the terrace. I didn't know if that the terrace would be something to look out from the dining room, if you'd be able to, have a set of doors where if it was a nice weather, they could actually go outside. But those are some of my initial thoughts when I saw it, and I'll open it up to Terry if you have any questions. I figured you had a few things right away.
Yeah. So actually, though, I both layouts are very, very interesting. Yes, George and I were questioning about the companion bathrooms. The thing I noticed on plan 2 is my question is that lobby space when you walk in and then it has the dotted line. Is that a closed area space for them to be able to sit and gather? Or what is that actual space there?
That's actually the cafe. I think the cafe word wandered outside of the cafe. So this little space right here to the right of the word lobby should be that's the cafe.
Okay.
So that will be a little bit more like a coffee shop feel to it. Dedicated seating.
Okay.
Similar to Ludlow, Terry. You walk in and the cafe was kind of on the left.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I do. Could you go back to 1 for a minute?
Sure.
So the cafe. So it is, and looking at this, I like how obviously the fitness room and the bathrooms right there. My only concern is that with number 1, the bathrooms right when you walk in, having the bathrooms right there. Kind of, especially right next to administration and all that, having the bathrooms just right there. And I didn't know if with seeing that the meeting classroom, are all these that when you have all of these rooms together, are there windows, a lot of like open space that you can see from one thing to the next? It's hard to say with these blocks that you have saying one thing to the next. Can people see in these rooms and it kind of gives that open effect, or how does that all work?
That's a really good question, and definitely be part of the next amount of detail. And no, you're not ahead of yourself. It's a really good question. It'll be the next layer of detail that we bring into it. But yes, in the case of I forget because we have a certain number of things that we just say, oh yes, the kitchen will be solid and the meeting room will have glass in it. But yes, the kitchen would be a very solid thing. Admin would be rather glassy, so you could see into it and potentially even partially open like in Ludlow. The meeting classroom would definitely have some windows, some interior windows. And then you can assume that everything that's blue would have exterior windows except for the bathroom. Everything that's blue has exterior windows as well. So yes, for arts and crafts, there would be more than just the door. There might be side lights to the door. There might be transom windows that connect the interior uses with so that you could see across from side to side.
I have to say, and then I'll let someone else talk, but I think between diagram number 1 and diagram number 2, I tend to flow to diagram number 2. And the reason for that is the way, when diagram number 1, you're walking in and there's like on a wall with the kitchen, you know, the kitchen being right there, versus this, when you're walking in, it seems like there'd be more of a flow. But I'm not sure if that's.
I completely see that. One of the challenges to this diagram was to get the entry over to the northeast as far as possible, to get it to be not just due north, so that as the drop off happens, it's at the corner of the building as you turn into the parking lot. I'm waving my hands. Let me go back to the site plan. So there you go. So as you come in, we had illustrated the entry right on the corner. And so that's what we were trying to push for in diagram number 1. In diagram number 2, the entry would be a little bit more central. It would be right up the middle of the building. So you drop off and then you drive around, and then I think we still have to figure out the way to get back to the front door, because the front door is kind of behind you at that point. So all of that is to say, I'm going to skip back to the plan. This one's about diagonal movement from the upper right to the lower left, kind of moving diagonally across the page. Whereas this one is about movement right down the middle and then across. So it's kind of biaxial movement. Yes, I'm totally with you. I think they're both good. But I hear what you're saying.
I think what we're hoping to get out of tonight is the adjacencies and the locations and the groupings of certain things. You know, are we on the right track as a team on the groupings? I mean, 2 is definitely linear. 1 is definitely not. 2 also, I mean, right out of the gate, dining and function should be swapped with the kitchen so that you can have loading on the side of the building and dining can overlook the terrace. So, but the massing, the program and the adjacencies are right. It just needs to be flopped. But it's all like he said. There'll be so many more little nooks and crannies in this thing when we develop. But we kind of need to know. You know, is it okay to have exercise across from dining and recreation next to arts and crafts? And you know, are these functions going to work for your programming? Those type of things I think are important. And the concept of coming in and having the terrace be a little more figural than field.
I'd like
Well,
to just
Okay
say,
to say you don't like these, by the way.
Yeah.
Well,
Well-
because we want it right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
don't be afraid to bash them.
Teresa, did you have a comment?
yes, I just want to say that I think that diagram number 2 really intrigues me, because when you walk in that front door, you're immediately going to be looking outside onto the terrace, as we mentioned earlier. And I think that's a really important attribute of this building. I also like the way the corridors are shortened, and you can come in and you can go almost anywhere in a very short walk. Diagram 1, I fully understand about moving the entryway to make it more convenient for people arriving. But I just feel that it would lack a little something if you come in and you're immediately just met with all types of choices, rather than, you know, the beautiful outdoors staring you in the eyes and giving you a chance to regroup and think about where you want to be and who you're waiting for and that type of thing.
Yeah, Teresa, if I may, I hope you have more comments, but I want to respond to that, because what I had imagined as we were developing this is that the terrace in the courtyard space would be a surprise in the scheme. It's probably going to be a surprise in the other scheme as well, but you discover it. So it's kind of, you go around the corner and then you say, oh, wow, there's a patio here, as opposed to blam right up the middle and you're looking through at the patio. So it's a kind of it's a different type of experience. You won't be able to see the terrace from the street for either of these really. And so it would be a little bit of a hidden surprise. a little bit more private than wide open. So that's kind of the difference in the feeling between these. Not that I'm trying to convince you, I'm just trying to explain.
Right. Mhm.
Lee, I would have a comment that I agree with Terry and Teresa that number 2, I kind of like the way it lays out. But the only thing I don't like here in comparison to number 1 is if you look where the cafe, even though the word's not there,
Yeah.
it's not really adjacent to the kitchen. And I don't like
Yes.
to keep comparing things to Ludlow, but I thought where they had that little cafe and it was adjacent to the kitchen. So if you go back to number 1, you'll see that the cafe and the kitchen are right there. So you'd be able to have everything prepped, everything done, and just be able to take it right out of the kitchen into the cafe instead of trying to transport it through the facility. Just a comment, but I do like the layout of the number 2.
Thank you. And we are aware of that we broke a rule here. I wasn't going to bring up all the rules that I broke because it would take a while, but there is a rule that we broke about separating the kitchen and the cafe. And we could design our way around that. We could simply, instead of maybe flipping this whole dining kitchen, maybe we have the cafe along the side of the courtyard and we move some things around. So I think we can design our way out of that problem.
It was just a thought, you know.
I'm with you. I'm thinking some things. That's good. Teresa, did you have other comments?
No, I think they're both very good and very interesting. And my only comment basically was, what's your preference? Would you want a surprise when you see the terrace, as you mentioned, which is a fun idea? Or do you want to walk in and, immediately feel intrigued by it and either relaxed by it or excited to get out there?
It would definitely, I'm excited about both of these. I think the idea of seeing through the building to the terrace outside when you walk in is exciting because it's always going to be changing due to the weather and the light.
Right.
And that's kind of an interesting backdrop to be your first view.
If I could state it and going further with what Teresa's saying, I mean, I think at this point, we want people to be able to come to the senior center and just have a sigh of relief when they walk inside like this. I feel very comfortable. Oh, I could sit here for hours, or I could meet so-and-so here. So I don't, I think it's just so, in this number 2 that you have here, it's just so, it is very pleasant to think that they'd be walking in and it's just like, oh, I'm here, and it's just, it's very intriguing as to how you have this. The only question that I do have when we're talking about the kitchen, and I'm so sorry if is there any, I see you have the kitchen and the dining room, but is there a way, just a thought, and I don't know if this could happen, is the dining room and the kitchen switching? Is that just so that when people also come in, that's all workable space that people can walk to, and the kitchen is off to the side, because really it would be more staff and really using the kitchen per se. So I just don't know about that.
Yes. I have a stack of paper over here, transparent paper that we use trace paper to come up with different versions. And there's all these different flips and flops that we've explored. And I think we haven't done that one yet, but we'll do that along with a whole bunch of others. So we'll explore flipping the kitchen and the dining room and what that does for us or what that doesn't do for us, along with all the other suggestions you make tonight. If I can write them down fast enough, we'll explore them and see which ones start to really resonate. So yes, thank you.
Okay.
Lee, is
go
there
ahead.
Is that Jeff?
Yeah, Lee, if just a question in terms of, and I think it's consistent in both plans 1 and 2. The terrace area is recessed from the outer edges of the back side of the building. Is there a particular reason for that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Where it doesn't go all the way out to the edge of the building.
Right.
To be totally honest, the building is tending to enclose more space than we really need as a terrace. And so I'm thinking of the terrace as paved or hardscape, whether it's just simply concrete with, scored lines on it, or if it's something nicer like flagstone or large pavers or a textured paver. But I think of it as a hardscape space where if you wanted to set up a tent like you do now, you could do that, for the heat of the summer, you could set up a tent. Or if you wanted to do like a flu shot clinic in the middle of the winter, you could do that outside as well. But it would be a hardscape kind of area, and it only needs to be so big. And so the extra bit that goes past will be, well, we're going to talk about that next in our next set of discussions, but it could be gardens, it could be flower gardens, it could be vegetables, it could be raised planters, it could be bocce courts, or probably not pickleball, it's a little close to the building, but it could be any transition into the landscape after that. So it was really just to say, we said 50 by 50, here's what that looks like.
So I guess the other comment on number 2, I think one of the virtues perhaps of number 2, if the dining and kitchen were flipped, that on a portion, the terrace side of the dining area, you could have more of a glass wall there, so that you could be sitting inside but still get the effects of light coming in from the terrace, and certainly doors perhaps coming from the dining area, so you could go directly out onto the terrace.
That sounds wonderful. Yes, we'll explore that. I see a couple
Lee?
of hands, George. I'm sorry, just a second, George. I think Paul and Diane both have their hands up in the Zoom version. Not to cut you off, John.
Okay.
Hey, Paul, go ahead. You haven't asked anything yet, so you're muted, Paul.
Diane had her hand up first. I'll defer to her.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Well, I think between diagram 1 and diagram 2, I tend to agree with Terry and Teresa that I prefer the entryway in the center. And I think that makes for a better opening when you come in the building rather than at the far end.
Mm-hmm.
I also like the comment that Jeff just made in flipping the dining room where the kitchen is and put the kitchen at the end, because we have been talking about, even when we went to view these other senior centers, that they had their kitchen in the front, and with deliveries and things like that, and maybe Terry have continuing with these grab and goes where they come in and get this luncheon, and everything, which later on will come about the circulation and everything, but having the kitchen on the far end, but more importantly, the dining and the function would then be looking out into the terrace, which, for any kind of design or whatever we're going to do would make it very nice. And I think having that opening function there,
Mm-hmm.
and it would also have windows in the back, but the kitchen on the right side would definitely be a plus. Now, my other question is that I know we have a library in here somewhere.
Yeah.
And so, but I was looking at the, spaces again, and I was reading over them, and we talked about that along the hallways, there were going to be bookcases and for storage, or, benches for storage and everything. But where is the library? Where do you envision that? Or like a seating area for quietness that they want to sit and read and have a little quiet area?
That is a really good question, Diane, and thank you for bringing that up. I'm holding it in my back pocket, and I'll explain my theory, and we'll see if you guys like it. It was a little hard to illustrate because it's spread out throughout the building a little bit. So one idea that I had was, could we incorporate the library, like we had said, in the common spaces, like in the gallery, for example? Could, in between whatever doors we have to go out to the terrace, could we have built-in bench seating that is also that maybe has bookcases between it, Maybe it's just the bookcases between the windows. So the first couple of feet is all just bookcases with large windows on top of it. And then the soft seating of the cafe or whatever alcoves we have adjacent to this space are also part of the library. So instead of a room that's a library, that the library is lining the walls of the corridor to enrich the corridor spaces so that they're not just, drywall with a fire alarm every once in a while, but something that has built-in book storage. And that could work for this one or this one. And you see how there's this little return here. There's a little extra space in the corridor. The idea there was when a corridor gets wider, it does one of two things. It can either offer a lot of people the ability to move through, like in a stadium, or if it's in a smaller building, when a corridor gets wider, it slows traffic down. And on purpose, if you make it broader and put soft seating, it automatically gives you a place of rest. And so this widened corridor here called the gallery really could be the library.
Mm-hmm. Well, the only thing I'm thinking about is, I'm thinking about people that are going to be moving around maybe in wheelchairs, as well as, going up and down with, as well as people with walkers, that there isn't like a real dedicated space where, like I remember, I think it was Ludlow, where there was like a little corner made in there with seating around and everything, and kind of really gave you a little bit of coziness and didn't interfere with the walkway going back and forth. So if there is some way that we can make an alcove area to, accommodate that, and then, along the gallery there, I like the idea of the storage space, because you never have enough storage space. That's for sure. So the other thing I'm thinking about is with this flipping of the dining and function area there, especially if you have a large crowd, it's going to be perfect where the restrooms are going to be right across from it. And, rather than, and they seem to be a little more centralized in plan 2 than at the far end, where if you're way down here at the game room, you got to walk all the way down to the end. So they're a little more centralized there. And one other thing is I was looking originally at, the original plans that we were given here, and we had asked for a scale here. And so the scale on it just doesn't match up. And I'm trying to visualize the size of this building. And, what you had here, the 1 inch equals 200 feet, doesn't quite, the bar scale at the bottom doesn't match up.
You're absolutely right. And I do apologize for that. It was a last minute oversight. We did this plan so it fits on the screen and maximizes on the screen. We can put a graphic scale on there for when it gets it printed out. It was an oversight. We will definitely fix that in the future. And we don't have any doors. Sometimes doors help, or stairs, because we know how wide a door or stair is. And so we left you adrift there unintentionally. The best way to describe it is, well, the space between these two walls going into the bathroom is about 4 feet. So that's a little wider than a door. And this entry vestibule is about, I think, 12 feet wide. And this yellow section here is 12 feet wide. That doesn't really help. But we'll
I'm
get a
thinking
little
of the
more
dimensions of the building, Lee. What are we talking about, the dimensions of the building?
I am actually going to claim ignorance on this, and there's a strategy.
Okay.
If I said 150 feet long, it's not a fair description, because the building has both length and height. And until we begin to look at it in volume studies and how tall it is and what the shape of the roof is and how its massing works, it's a little unfair to say it's as big as a school bus or something, give you some sort of comparison. We should really look at that all together. We started doing this week. Grant and I started flying around this, because this is actually a digital model that has 3-dimensional characteristics. We started flying around to see what it looks like. And we discovered that we had drawn the terrace too big. Not too big in a way of square footage too big, but too big in that it didn't feel good. And so we actually tightened up the terrace. It's about 40 by 40-ish right now. So it's a little, yeah, about 40 feet wide by maybe 60 feet long. And so we made it a little narrower so it was more comfortable based on our preliminary findings. And that's the kind of stuff we want to share with you next week. So
Oh,
I'm sorry
okay.
for the non-answer, but I don't want to give anyone a false impression of whether it's too big or too small, because we're not quite there yet.
Okay, but the overall footprint of the building is going to be about 18,000 square feet, and whatever that comes out to length
Yes.
and width, we're going to be about that size. And I think just one last question: is the survey all done for the building, for that area?
Dan, I believe it's not. You're on mute, Dan.
I'm sorry, the instrument survey
Yes.
for the site is ongoing. It is not.
Oh, it's ongoing? Okay. I was just going to make a suggestion that when it's completed, you know, that maybe it would be good if the surveyors staked out the building corners, you know, once we get this thing kind of finalized, and people could, you know, really get a feel, especially the committee members, you know, although we're getting, what, 2 feet of snow next week. But I mean,
Well, that was one reason I chuckled. The other reason I chuckled, I'm sorry to interrupt, Diane. The other reason I
That's
chuckled
okay.
is you're going to have a hard time finding the stakes in the trees.
Yeah,
Right.
there's a lot of wood.
yeah. But
yes,
but,
yes.
but you know, maybe later on, you know, whatever, as we finalize this building, and just to go back to what George said the companion bathroom. So there is enough room here to also make companion bathrooms
Yes.
separate along with those bathrooms there.
Yeah. Yes, Diane. Let me speak to the companion bathrooms and the bathroom location in general, because it's come up a couple of times, and I don't want to dismiss these comments. The strategy here is to put the large multi-user toilet rooms, which are labeled men's and women's in this plan, relatively close to the dining room function, because that's where the most people are going to be at any given time, and you need the most fixtures at any given time. If you have bingo night or a large meal or something, you're going to need all 7 toilets. Not necessarily if you have arts and crafts. So the other side of the plan, where it says arts and crafts and recreation, there will be a couple of companion restrooms over there, so that we're not looking at a long travel distance. So that's the basic strategy for both of these. Whoops, wrong. Let's do it this way. So that's oops, I've fallen off my mouse. There we go. So that's the strategy for this, that one wing will have some companion restrooms. The other wing will have the multi-user restrooms. And if we come to a building diagram where it's really split up the middle, we could also do 2 sets of restrooms, do half the fixtures on one side and half the fixtures on the other, as well as the companion restrooms. It's a little bit more expensive, but if you build a half-size restroom, there's half the toilets, half the tile, half the sinks.
Right. And I presume that the ADA requirements will fall into place with the men's and women's bathrooms as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. We have a very sophisticated approach to that, which is actually the 521 CMR, which is the state version of the Americans with Disabilities Act, along with all of the other guidelines that are provided by the state for universal accessibility for commonly used spaces. Will govern. Yes.
You know, Paul still had a question. He's been waiting.
Yes, he does. Yeah. Sorry.
No, I think I'm finished. I can yield to Paul. Thank you, Paul, for letting me go before you.
Thanks, Diane.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Diane. I agree with my fellow committee members that diagram 2 is a good start, and I place it above diagram 1.
Okay.
I kind of envision like the cafe and gallery area. I know you said there's going to be soft seating there, but that rectangle, that cafe gallery, that rectangle, excluding the lobby area, by your measurements that you gave, I'm thinking it's probably going to be about, I don't know, 24 feet by maybe 40 feet ish.
That's about right. Yeah, about 20 by 40. Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't mind even seeing that gallery pushed out, maybe to see the terrace pushed out down in the diagram a bit more and seeing that gallery increased, because I can envision, like, you know, couches there, and maybe there's a TV set there. It's just a place for people to land, and maybe as they're waiting for programs or just to kibitz. I remember in another life, I used to go to the Tewksbury Senior Center a lot, and they had a wide open area as you walk in there. And I can remember every time I went in there, there was a dozen people in this wide open area with couches. Do you remember that, Terry? Had you ever been to the old Senior Center in Tewksbury?
The old one, no.
Yes, and you know what? I think you bring up a great point, because that would be nice.
Just a nice kind of like a flop down area when you're waiting for a program to start, or just to get together and just be social with other people. You know, excluding the dining area and having the cafe part of that area would be just such a great space.
That sounds great. Yeah, I like that.
So if you nudge the terrace down a little bit and whatever you do, and I love the idea of having the dining room adjacent to the terrace, maybe with a door and certainly with windows and that light coming in. I think that's great. And I don't know. I'm bugged that the arts, crafts, game room, recreation, meeting area is down there, and that mechanical space is up front. It seems that the mechanical space is taking up some good real estate. I don't know.
Let me respond to that a little bit. The trick about this building diagram is every building has a backside.
Yeah.
Every building, your house, your office, every building has a backside. This one is having a bit of trouble. It doesn't really have a backside because the left side faces Main Street. The north side, or the top of the sheet, is where you drive in. So that's kind of like and it's kind of the front door in a little bit of a way. The right side is the side off the parking lot, and the bottom side of the page is the face out to the green space. And so it doesn't really have a backside, but it needs one, because there needs to be a place where we can flipping the kitchen and the dining room. We need a place where we can do service. There needs to be a spot where utilities can enter the building, you know, underground, and come up in a convenient place. And so it's counterintuitive, but the mechanical space in the upper left-hand corner is actually very convenient. It's facing northwest, kind of a dark spot in the building, northwest, and it's the closest corner to the services on the street. So the benefit of the game room and the arts rooms and the recreation being south is that you actually get a lot more daylight on that direction.
Yeah, maybe I just needed that explanation.
I think I'm willing to explore more.
I actually think it's going to be helpful too to have a wall facing the street without a window, so that you have room for signage. I know it sounds bizarre, but you want people driving by to see a nice sign on the building.
Yeah,
good point.
Yeah, I think it's a great start. Really think it's a great start.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Jack Holloway is just waving his hand, and I can't wait to talk to you, Jack.
I actually have something to say.
Go ahead, Jack.
If you move the kitchen down to the corner, that'd be a great area for the cafe to be right there.
I agree. And it
Give
actually
a lot of
solves
space for the cafe with some tables and chairs.
Yeah, so take this and slide it down here, and then you have an open spot right there.
Right. And I do like the diagram too.
Next to the terrace.
Yeah, I'll tease that out.
Service, you got to have service for the kitchen. Deliveries can come in the side door off the parking lot.
Right, that works good if you flip that with the dining room.
Yeah. So we're talking about the dining room and function flipping with the kitchen. So the kitchen is on the end, and then the cafe being brought down closer to that end.
I think that works best for, that's my opinion, for multiple reasons. One, what Dan just said about deliveries, services, foods coming in, not going through the whole place. Also for drive up for Terry's events, where she might want to be handing out grab and go bags. It might be right out the kitchen as they go. It also provides for the doors and the access to the terrace from the dining room. So you could open those doors up in the summertime and maybe have some seating outside, or be able to go right out to the terrace. You
Mhm.
could bump it down and maybe do something with that, but I think that flipping that's a better idea.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that, Judge.
To go a little bit further on Jack's comment, if we go back to the site plan,
Mhm.
and see how the service is kind of at this back corner, there's a little bit of a drive here.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine if the kitchen were right here. It's actually pretty close to that service drop and would be kind of around the corner. Now, I agree with everything you said, George, about the opening onto the terrace and all that kind of thing. I'm just saying it's actually not a bad idea, and it might be a way to still keep the kitchen next to the cafe if the cafe is at the entry. This is going to take some work. I like this. This is going to be a good challenge. I like this.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing I think is the advantage of flipping them is that when we say dining and function, you're thinking of a large group of people. And I think in the planning was like 225 people, something
Yeah.
like that it could sit for whatever that function may be. And if it were in the nice weather and everything, you know, you would have the advantage of having the opening near the terrace.
Mhm.
You know, if there were whatever it's escaped with. But yeah, you're going to play around with that and see
Yeah.
what way, because we don't want to give up the cafe. We loved that cafe. That was a really nice area of the cafe. And I also strongly agree with what Paul was saying, that to come down deeper with the gallery, people do like those soft chairs to sit in and you know, talk without blocking the pathway for, you know, wheelchair. Think of wheelchair people or whatever we have. Is the game room too in the corner, Lee? Is that where we put like the billiards table as well and things like that?
No, the short answer is no. Maybe more
Oh, okay.
exact. The recreation space is actually the space that has the billiards fit into it. But that's an interesting point, Diane. And I would wonder if I could ask the committee at this point, does it make sense to combine the game room and the recreation room, just conceptually, if not as one room, but potentially as two rooms that might be open to each other for flexibility? Does that benefit us at all? Or are there different uses between those two rooms?
If there's going to be billiards, I don't see it.
Well, I see that, you know, personally, let's say, for example, if there's card games and that type of thing, it might be better that they're two separate entities.
Okay.
Also being able to take advantage of that room and say something, you know, if we could use at the last minute need to use it for something else. It
Sure.
might be the advantage of being two separate entities of itself.
Okay. Okay.
Can I just
That's
ask a
great.
question?
Thanks.
One
Yeah.
quick question. So I do have you know, as we're talking here and as we're reflecting to the outside, you know, this is wonderful. One thing that comes up in my mind is the parking.
Yes.
Like the way that where that entrance is in the front, but the parking is all the way to the side. How
Yes.
much of a distance are we expecting people to park from the parking lot to that front door? And are they
No.
going to gravitate to that side entrance, which would default the whole reason of your wonderful front entrance to see that awesome setup? So a little concern there about I'm so sorry, but with the parking.
Don't apologize. This was in my mind. One of the concerns I have with this scheme, like I said, I broke a lot of rules. One of my concerns with the scheme is that the entry is awfully far from the parking lot. We really have a north-facing entry here. I don't like north-facing entries in New England. Nothing against New England or nothing against north entries, but I've been the poor sap that usually shovels the north facing entries and puts the salt on it over and over and over all winter long.
Yeah.
And it's a losing battle. It's really hard to make a completely north facing entry ice free. It's where we live, you know? So by getting it closer to the corner, it definitely helps. While we've been talking, I've had some ideas of how we might run with me here for a second. It's not totally figured out, but I want to share my thought process. We could take admin and move it over to the right side and take the exercise and fitness and move it over to the left side, potentially.
Mhm.
And that would allow us to, you can see how admin and fitness in the men's room and women's room, they're a little wider than the other side of the plan. We might be able to scooch the lobby ever so slightly over, keeping the same, you know, axial relationship between the entry and the terrace. We might be able to get admin a little closer to the parking lot. We might be able to let the entry maybe wander a little closer to the parking lot as well, so that admin could control the main lobby, and they might also have eyes on the secondary lobby as an idea. Now you still have a separation of the noisy stuff from the quiet stuff, because the fitness would be across the hall from all of the other things.
Well, yeah, I wonder if there's a way to potentially even move the kitchen to above the dining function area. And then that would give you adjacency to the cafe, and it would give the dining room adjacency to the terrace.
I had thought about that, and I have been the victim of that move before. It was in a middle school where we put the kitchen on the other side of the main corridor from the dining room, and I said never again. It's a fundamental flaw.
Mhm.
I'm just thinking it gives you access to the kitchen from the right side of the building and the parking lot for deliveries, and but I'll defer to you, the other man.
No, it's just having to get through that and seeing what it does to a whole bunch of people going to get food and then get to the dining space and crossing back and forth across a major corridor. I wouldn't recommend it. I think we can solve it a better way. This is the better way.
Excuse me, Lee.
Yes, please.
Two quick things. I want to just acknowledge that Selectman and Committee Member Greg Bendel is with us. He's joined us, so he might have some questions. And I
Excellent.
see that the town manager has his hand up, and I know he has a question.
All right.
So I just, and I sent it as a chat out to folks, but in the mechanical room, I agree with Paul's earlier comments about some measure of concern with that being located where it is, notwithstanding the comments that were made after, but presumably the mechanical room and the kitchen area are going to be the places where deliveries or access for repairs or whatever will have to be made. I don't know if there's an opportunity or whether it would be advisable to try to concentrate those two spaces into one location so that you don't have trucks, heavy vehicles or whatever going to two different parts of the building, or maybe there's a virtue in breaking it up. And then
that's a very good observation. Thank you, Jeff. I take this as a challenge. I don't know if I can do it, but I like where you're at. So thank you. Yes.
And I guess the other question, which I was going to direct to George, is that terrace space in the back. I think one of the questions we need to be thinking about from a practical standpoint is during this time of the year, is the expectation that that's going to be, not that certainly in this weather people are going to be going out there unless they want to do the polar plunge, but is the expectation that that's going to be shoveled out and cleared and remain as accessible as it is during the spring and summer and fall?
Well, I did notice that in his breakout, he had a spot there for a snow blower. So any means of egress would definitely be cleared. I don't know if Terry was planning on something out there. Of course, we would have it all cleared off, but as a practical matter, typical to the high school courtyard, We don't typically snow blow that out and clear that all out, so.
That's what I was gonna say, George. What do we do in the courtyard?
Hmm.
I would offer that for the ease of maintenance and simplicity, I would suggest we avoid using the terrace or the courtyard as a means of egress for that exact reason. If we can satisfy egress requirements in other directions, and I think this plan offers a couple of ways to do that, I think it would be easier and for you to maintain in the future. And that way, if you want to just watch the snowfall, you can do that and you don't have to worry about shoveling it.
And just as the practical, I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead, Terry. Go ahead.
As the practicality of really people going outside in the winter, right now, I mean, I can't imagine that the terrace really needs to be as of importance to be able to clear for like December, January, February. I mean, the rest of the building, there's also stuff, looking outside and just being indoors. I don't see that as a high priority of making sure that that's clear to be active, to be used during this time of year, because I don't see people going out there.
Yeah, I kind of see it like a 3-season room almost,
Yeah.
You have the dining function room, you have the admin suite, and then the terrace is just a room you don't really use in the winter. Nothing wrong with that. It still gives you all of the visual delight of being able to see outside, but it's a room you use when it's nice.
Lee, I would just like to ask a question. The admin where it is right now on diagram 2 is a very, very good location, in my opinion, because I would think that, Terry's administrative staff would want to be close to the entry.
Yes.
As people are coming in, and maybe there's a curved desk there or something like that to help the people as they come in. I'm going to get back to this gallery area where we said we could make it deeper or whatever. And I'm thinking that, even cozier, is there any way we could get like a gas fireplace in there or something that would even give it a cozier feeling, especially if the terrace is all filled with snow?
I stopped short of that, Diane. I was thinking the exact same thing. A fireplace of stone would be beautiful in there.
It's a natural association with the large kind of family room or the lodge main room. It's a age-old association of hearth and the center of the house. I'm not going to fight that. I'll design the heck out of that if you want to do that. It's really up to the committee and how you best want to use your dollars. I think at this time, it's important to remember that in every building project, you only get a couple of special things that you can really make wonderful. The whole building still needs to get built. You still need to get a mechanical system and all those other things. But architecturally, there's going to be 2 or 3 things that you say, that's the point of the building. And as we move through the design process, I'll continue to check in and say, is this the point of the building? Or should we spend our money on that thing? Not that every space won't be nice, but every space will be absolutely adequate and beautifully designed. And then there'll be the special things. And so if a hearth and a big waiting lounge space is the special thing, then we'll just have to prioritize that and make sure that we do it.
Thank you.
Hey, George,
Go ahead, Dan.
can I speak?
Sure. Does that ever stopped you before?
No. A couple of things. One, we got a chat question from Jeff, and the question was, will the mechanical space be too noisy to admin? And that really will depend on what we do for a HVAC system. If it's air-based, it will probably be noisy. Even though we can soundproof it, there'll still be noise, ambient noise. If it's a VRF system or a forced water system, there'll probably be no noise. I think that the mechanical space is incredibly large, especially if we have a VRF system. We won't need nearly that much space. So I think we've created at least a little elbow room in the plan for some of these things that everyone's talking about. So there's little areas for us to push and pull on the plan. The terrace is going back and forth, and my concern with the terrace is that it's too small, because it was one of the things that we had a problem with in Ludlow, was the terrace was too small, and we made it bigger. Because when you add the roofs to the exterior of the building and the overhangs,
Mhm.
it starts to crowd in the terrace. So I think that you might want to be thinking of that, Lee, too, when you're looking at the terrace. And I don't think it would be a bad idea for you to have a chat with Terry again about the function of the terrace, so that as you're moving forward with the design of the interior, the exterior terrace can start taking shape, so we understand exactly what it's going to be, not just a square.
Absolutely. I appreciate that.
I can tell you that in Kingston, where we built the senior center, Terry, the entry was exactly the way it is here, and the seniors all wanted to go to the door closest to the corridor on the end, just like in your mind, they're going to want to do. And it was quite a hubbub at the time, because security is all related around the front door and checking in and sliding your card through and all that. So I think we need to really be cognizant of how the interplay with the parking works, and whether we can somehow or another juxtaposition that some way. I know we have the building close to the street, but maybe if the building slides back a little bit and parking slides up a little bit, I know there'll be some iterations of that, but I don't like the workshop being so long and narrow. I know it's not developed. Obviously, it'll change and become more dimensionally appropriate, but I love the grouping of the spaces on number 2 and on number 1. And I think it just becomes a choice. But I think from a adjacency standpoint, I think that Dietz is getting there on the adjacencies. And I hope you guys feel the same way, because I think we should start developing a little bit, if you're okay with the adjacencies, because there's going to be things you don't like, as we're moving forward.
Yes, thank you, Dan. I agree with what you said, and I don't want to be negative, but as we make choices, we're going to get to a majority where we feel like, yes, this is a good direction to go, but something there'll always be an expense for each choice, meaning it may not be perfect, and we'll just say, okay, well, maybe that's not exactly where we wanted, I don't know, the kitchen service door, but it fits with everything else, and it's a good decision, and we move forward. There's always a little bit of a balance. There's going to be some things that we don't love about something about the building when we get done, but we'll say it's a specific building, it has a specific character, and it's the best that we could do. That's the hope.
I'm glad that Dan mentioned that there may be some more movement with this building being pushed back, and maybe parking, because that was one of my main concerns as I looked at the option again here at St. Dorothy's. I thought it was a little too close to the street. I think it would be nice to be a little further back and maybe accommodate. But there was also talk of a like a pavilion for that we have actually at the Shawshene School, which is beautiful, and have something like that outdoors. And, but I understand that as we get into a lot of the functions, we're also focusing on pricing here and thinking of total cost. So the focus right now, I guess, is let's look at the layout of the building and the placement of it and everything, and just make sure we've got everything covered. But I will say that mechanical space does concern me, being in the front of the building there. That's
I hear you, but which front are you concerned about? The front facing the street, the front next to the front door? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I like where administration is. I think that's perfect. And the mechanical space, we're talking about workshops, right? And maybe
Well,
some machinery.
the mechanical space, this is to Dan's point as well. It is a group of a whole bunch of things, and it's a placeholder. So I'm going to skip up. It's all of the things that are in gray here. So yes, there'll be a custodian sink. There's a laundry space, whether it's in that space or next to the kitchen. There's general storage, loading. So loading is a concern that we have to figure out whether it's there or if it's more near the kitchen. Electrical rooms, server rooms, just general equipment, as well as whatever mechanical equipment we need there. So there needs to be a place for the water to come into the building, a place for the electrical to come into the building, for the gas if we use gas. And that's where those are. It's actually a bunch of little rooms, to be totally honest with you. There's not a particularly big room among them. So it might be all in that corner, and it might be broken up throughout the plan. And in the case of Ludlow, a bunch of these were actually in the attic. And
Yes,
so,
we went into the attic. Yes.
oh, wow. Lucky you.
That's what I thought was going to happen with this building.
It
I
may.
thought a lot of mechanical stuff.
Well, we also had a mechanical room with the water heater, because you don't put a water heater in an attic.
Right.
So there was a mechanical room, but it was large, and it didn't need to be as large. And I think that's where
Yeah.
I was trying to go, is
Yeah.
I want to make sure that where square footage costs so much money, and I think you know, at some point in time, cost is going to become forefront.
Yes.
Mhm.
You know, we'll need to be talking about that. You know, I also want you to start thinking about the building as a modular unit, in that, you know, all these jigs and jogs cost money. And, you know, sorry, Mr. Designer, but, you know, I want trusses that
Oh,
are
Nan.
one, things that will cause repetition, because that will bring the cost of the building down. And as we start developing this, that doesn't mean the building doesn't need to have features. We just need to be cognizant of what we're doing. If the building's a wood framed building, it's certainly easier to have more jogs than if it's not a wood frame building. And we're not at that point yet where we're deciding what the structure is or what the systems are.
That's an excellent point. Yes, and we have actually been thinking about the shapes of these spaces as you see them represent somewhat optimized shapes, not all of them, but somewhat optimized shapes for the larger spaces for their use. The men's and women's room, for example, looked quite a lot like a bathroom on purpose. There's no sense in reinventing the way that we lay out a bathroom. This is the shape that it's going to be, so we're just going to put it in there. The kitchen, somewhat fungible. The dining function space really wants to be a rectangle that we can split in half. Fitness room has to be a certain shape. Arts and crafts has to be a certain shape. So there's some things that are kind of rigid, like the bathrooms kind of need to be that shape. And then there are some things that are squishy, like admin. You can make that almost any shape you want, because it's made of a bunch of little things. I realized that, George, you pointed out that Greg has joined us. So Greg, do you have not that I'm running the meeting, but I don't want to forget you, Greg. Do you have questions or comments?
Throw it out to him, but
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've just been listening in, and there's been a lot of good comments and questions. So appreciate the opportunity to listen to the conversation. Thank you.
Okay.
Lee, you know, something I was just looking at on number 2 there,
Mhm.
you know, if you could flip back, and just in my mind, if we had swapped the fitness and equipment room over where the admin and mechanical space was, and you just put the admin on the other side of the hall, slid the men's and women's room down a little bit so they're across from the dining room, and then you had
Yep.
mechanical space there.
Yep.
So you had your fitness and your equipment. Just a thought, you know.
I completely agree. This is a lot like a game of chess. And it's how many moves ahead can you think of while you're doing this and having a conversation. And I'm trying to do that right now, and I don't want to share that all with you and confuse you all. I want to save it so that I can put my thoughts into it, but I'm with you. I'm in the same game of chess that you're doing. So yes.
Okay.
Lee, there was
Can I-
at one meeting, I remember, the person that was in charge of the ceramics, and she was talking a lot about having a closed area for her kiln and everything. Where are we talking about that? Because she was saying
Somewhere over here.
In
over
the
here.
artifacts area.
Yeah. She was hoping that there would be a segregated room for the
Yes.
kiln itself because it threw off so much heat and everything.
It's gotta be
That's-
ventilated too.
Yeah, that's how I've designed it before. Whether it's a direct vent kiln or if it has its own room, there are a couple different ways to do it. It's best to have it in its own room. I've done kiln off of a storage room, so you can have the ceramics go on their racks into a place where they dry, and it's also a place where once you take the ceramics out of the kiln, they can be cooled because they're cool relative to ceramics, but they're not cool. So you need to let them cool off some more before you bring them out into the art space, and it's definitely a good way to do it.
Okay, got it. Got it.
Terry, did you
And I
have a
just-
question?
Yes, Lee, actually, between what George said and then you had mentioned earlier about that administration room when we were saying, when I concerned about parking and about the entrance. I do see the administration being on the other side and advantageous so that, whoever's in the office can really have a view of the outdoors as to
Yeah.
who's coming in, who needs assistance,
Agreed.
who's being dropped off, so keeping an eye on both areas. So I do see that. And Lee, you did bring that up a little bit. Oops, sorry, my dog, a little bit earlier. So I do see that as a good thing.
Oh, good. Thank you for the feedback. Okay, it's another check mark on that idea. I'll incorporate that into the diagram as well.
Lee, if I could just jump in about the building orientation, I forget, it might have been Terry, somebody mentioned the issue about, parking being kind of the magnet as to where people will enter the building. And clearly a perfect example of that for us is a library. The building, as it's designed, I've always been impressed by the design. I don't know whether it's Federalist or what the term is, but it has a very nice front entrance. The problem is the parking is in the back. So, 98% of the folks that go into the building come into the back side of the building, which isn't a particularly inviting entrance.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, not to tip over the apple cart here, but certainly, I suspect with number two, the design number 2 here, which I think is the most attractive of the two. But if the reality is the parking is going to be behind the building, and vast majority of people are going to enter through that back door, if you will, or side door, that kind of throws off the whole concept of what we talked about with the orientation of the front to the terrace. Would it be worth looking at essentially turning the building so as this rectangle, reorient it so the rectangle is parallel to Route 38, which would then allow for the back of the building to be, the true entrance, I guess, or somehow reorienting the building so that the area which will be truly used by people who are parking clearly establishes the intent of being able to look through to the terrace.
I totally hear you,
Actually, I
Jeff.
guess maybe the only way to
Yeah.
do that is if, and I'm not necessarily a fan of this either, I suppose, but having the parking in the front, then orienting it so that the building is turned parallel to 38. You go in, to the building in the front in that case, and then you look through the back, which turns out to be the area between the building and Glen Road.
I completely hear you, Jeff. And I appreciate where you're coming from. And nothing bothers me more than historic renovations of old, beautiful buildings where they put the front door in a weird place just so that you can get easily into wherever they put the elevator. And that's usually what happens. It's, old buildings are not accessible for people with disabilities. And so you find this where can we put the elevator? And, we'll just put it off the back. And then the front door is just useless. There are a bunch of buildings like that at the campus, the college that I went to, and it bugged me. So I don't want us to end up with a really nice diagram where we like the front door is right onto the courtyard, but no one wants to use the front door because it's in the wrong place. For me, that's a fail. So we're going to work on this until we get the front door in a place that makes sense for all of the uses, the practical uses and the aspirational uses. And well, that's it. We're going to work on it until we get it right. Now, having said that, this building is laid out with a bunch of things in mind that are hyper specific to the piece of land that it's designed for. The orientation of the terrace being due south, the large dining room function being in the southeast, the recreation space being off of the terrace, and the arts and crafts rooms. All of those rooms they need daylight and sunlight. And the things like the mechanical space and the admin space can do, well, that mechanical doesn't need any sunlight at all. The admin space can use northern light very efficiently. It keeps it from getting overheated, for example. The fitness and equipment, exercise equipment, they make their own heat. They don't really need southern light, and they can do very nicely with filtered northern light. And so other than the front door facing due north, which I've already said I don't like and I want to fix, that's why the building's laid out the way it is. And then also, it being long across the page left to right gives it optimal solar orientation as a building as a whole. It's easier to control the daylight that comes in and prevent spaces from getting overheated when your building generally is a bar shape, kind of east to west. Bar shapes north to south tend to heat up in the morning on one side and then heat up in the afternoon on the other, and the light is very hard to control. So I hear what you're saying about getting the door in the right place, but turning the building would actually change the entire design of the building in order to get the right pieces and parts in the right place. We're willing to give that a try if that's what it takes, because I want to get the front door in the right place. Sorry, it's kind of a convoluted long answer.
Jeff has opened like a little Pandora's box here about
It's good. It's good.
building, but what, have you given any thought to like an L shape
Yes.
building?
Where's that pile of trace paper over there? I've got a whole bunch of L-shaped buildings. And it might end up that way. This diagram may bend. It may morph into something that looks fundamentally different than what we started with, but it may solve the problem better than what we have. And that's what we're going to be doing. Excellent transition, Diane. That's what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks, is getting this to be not only the right groupings of spaces, but the right associations internally and externally for the building. So, whoops. This one has kind of a diagonal movement that satisfies that circulation a little bit better, but isn't doing other things that we want it to do. This one is doing a lot of things that we want, but doesn't have that connection to the site that we want. Mm-hmm. And so what we'll do now is I'm hearing a resounding enthusiasm for diagram 2. So we'll take diagram 2 and we'll develop it, and we'll come up with 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, or 2 ABC, whatever. Mm-hmm. And we'll continue developing it. Over there on a clip on my desk here, I have like iterations that Grant and I have been doing. So he's got like diagram 4B and 4C and 4D, and we did a lot of iterations to get to these. We'll just keep going, because design is an iterative process. You take in information, you change things, and you do another version.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I thought was important is, especially when the entryway, and only because I happen to know of people that have disabilities, one of the places that I visited was in Newburyport, and what impressed me about the entryway was the long extension that they had for the front doors, so that the drop off could be made there, take the wheelchair out, help the person in, and they were covered. There was a long covered area for that person. And then the driver could get them in the building and then, maybe go park where the handicap parking is. So that is, it's either that or some sort of turnaround that, they get out of there, but something that the people with the handicap problem have the coverage, and they can just go under this carport or whatever.
Some sort of canopy or something.
Yeah, canopy, right. Thank you, Judge. Yeah, something like that.
So in response to that, the diagram that we have for the site, like how we move through the site, is kind of an elongated drop-off area.
Mhm.
So that's what we have now. I'd like to play on that a little bit more because our building I think it can respond to this. And maybe the elongated drop-off area has an awning off the side of the building that continues for some distance. So it isn't like a porte cochere where you go underneath, like at the Hilton. Instead, it's maybe a covered walk area along the side of the building as a character of the building that allows for a little bit more protection while you're getting out of the van. You know, the lift is going down and you're getting your stuff and your walker, whatever you need to make your way into the building. There's a longer queue because it takes more time. The benefit of this particular layout is it has like a bypass lane. So you get the vans here or your drop off. But if you don't need to go straight to the front door, you can go park and then you can come in. And so I'd like to tease that out a little bit more. And I see Dan has his hand up. I have a bunch of things I want to talk about. This is a teaser for the rest of the presentation. I don't want to cut the conversation short. I'll stay here all night. I'm sure no one wants that. But
I want to try and get a consensus because people are all over the place on certain little items.
Yes.
One item that is big that you discussed, I think, needs to be emphasized, and that is the south-facing building orientation. It really changes the dynamic of the lighting inside the building if we're going to change from a south-facing orientation. We can, but just be cognizant that that's a major change to what Lee is trying to do.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, yeah.
So just to jump in, I guess on that point, I would say that it seems important to have that south facing, and looking at the picture that Lee has up now, maybe, you know, it just, as I see that, and I may be misreading it here, but it almost seems like the entrance is set up in such a way that the side entrance and the back entrance, if you will, almost merge as one, combine as one entrance. So maybe that to some measure eliminates or reduces the problem of having people, you know, using the intended entrance that has all the positive features and not really getting that effect. I don't.
Yeah, that was the intent of this diagram when we sketched this out. And this predates the versions you're seeing tonight. So this was, the idea was the entry would be on the outside corner here, and the movement would be diagonally into the patio. And as you might have been able to tell by the numbering that we used, diagram 1 came directly from this, and diagram 2 came directly from the spatial adjacencies with this sighting. So I don't have an affinity. I like them both. But that's why diagram 1 looks quite a lot like the site plan you're seeing.
One other question I just wanted to throw out, and not to cause, you know, a lot of additional discussion here. And for those folks on the committee, those in particular that are on both groups, if you could help me out here. I seem to recall that during one of the prior conversations, a question being raised about creating a space within the building that could be closed off. So during the evenings, it could be used as a community meeting space, where, you know, even perhaps for non-senior groups. And I don't recall at this point whether that was directed for the senior center or whether that was directed for the town school admin. But I distinctly recall that suggestion being made, and I just wanted to, if it was with respect to the senior center, get a sense from folks as to what to do with that suggestion.
I'll vouch for you, Jeff. That was for this building. And thank you for reminding me of that, because that helps. I have an idea. I'll leave it to the committee.
I'm not concerned about it because most of that will be done with electronics and gates that will be hidden. So we'll get to that when we get to it, when you decide what it is you want to open up as a community to off hours. But clearly, women's, men's, and function will probably have to be in that.
I'm with you, Dan, but I will add that I like to do building use if it's phased throughout the day. I like to do it as passively as possible. So like in this, for example, if there were, like you were saying, a pair of doors, or if there were a pair of doors here, for example, this whole wing could be locked off if it didn't want to be used after hours. Or if there's a gate here, maybe, like you mentioned gates, that would be a way of blocking off this entire end so that the dining function could happen. And that helps me and my team put the pieces in the right place so that it's very easy to partition the building off and say the whole back of the building just gets locked off with a single gate or a single door. So that's good to know.
Can I just ask the town manager, are you talking about other activities non-related to senior activities? So a community area not related to seniors, is that?
Yeah, I believe that the question or the suggestion was raised at one of our prior meetings that there was a desire to see the ability for a space, probably the function space, or some space in this building that would be could be kind of just separately opened up without opening the whole building for other groups in town, whether, I don't know, it could be, similar to the use of the July 4th building, where there's various non-senior center, senior groups that could go in there and, and have it arranged so that the space would be scheduled, presumably through Terry or her office, for certain nights of the week if somebody wanted to go in there for a meeting or some kind of function. I distinctly remember that was posed, and I don't remember how we addressed that as a group here.
Well, didn't I know that in the town hall school administration building, that was definitely brought up as a community room, because I thought that Kevin Kyra said that, there are a lot of meetings that can't be accommodated at the 4th of July building. And we were going to work on that with the town hall / school administration, because they had a lot of conference rooms there. I thought that we were kind of ruling out any other social activities other than strictly senior functions here for the senior center.
I'd have to go back in the minutes and look, but I believe it was the town hall. And I don't want to get too much on that because I want to talk about that afterwards. But when it comes to the two.
Yeah, so I don't want to monopolize the conversation here or delay further. So we probably ought to just move on and take that up separately.
Okay, so if I may, George, and to Dan's point, I'm hearing support for plan diagram number 2. We've talked about a number of potential switches between spaces, switching the dining and the kitchen. We'll explore that. Maybe switching the fitness exercise area with admin, kind of switching their positions along the top of the plan. I've also heard a desire to potentially co-locate some of the mechanical spaces next to the kitchen so that we have shared service. And I think that's a really good suggestion, having a shared service entry to the building. And I've also heard a request to make the main entry respect both the terrace and the natural path of desire from the parking lot and the drop off. That last one's tricky, but I'm excited about that. Those are the primary, and also an awning for drop off. Those are the primary things that we're going to explore as we iterate this diagram moving forward. Is that a fair sum up of how you hear things, George?
I believe so. Committee members.
Yeah. Was there an option where the building was all the parking was in the front and the building was more towards the back?
There was, but we see if I can remember this correctly. We didn't go with it, or you didn't go with it, because it didn't offer a site plan that you liked as much.
Okay,
Because the circulation, you're testing my memory here. I believe, I'm going to draw with my finger in the air. I believe the circulation for that one meant we went all the way around the parking lot before we dropped off at the front door. And it pushed the building very far back and compromised the outdoor space because you
Okay.
had most of the front of the site used for parking.
okay,
I believe the reason we went with this one was because of the preferred drop off and because it was a more flexible use for how much parking we wanted to take over. And it gave us a really good chunk. I'm waving my arms instead of pointing to the screen. Gave us this big chunk of space right here in the middle of the
Yep.
of the lot that we could use for anything
Gotcha.
outside. And so it was a better synergy of the building and its adjacent outdoor uses due to the shape of the lot, because it's kind of a funky shaped lot. Okay. I'm going to zip through to the next topic. This is I'm going to give you now, we're going to take scheme 2 and we're going to develop it some more. So what's next? You might have seen the 6-week look ahead. This is a slightly enlarged version. This is the one that got printed out, Jeff, that I dropped off at your office. On here, you'll see a group of activities that happen. And then a week later, our request for your responses to those activities. Part of the point of this is to give you a preview of things coming up, but it's also part of it is to keep us honest about the things that are coming up. This is a little hard to read in a public presentation format, so I offer you the next 3 slides instead. So for the next meeting, which is slated for the 9th, and I'm not going to get into the scheduling, I'll let the committee do that. But in the next meeting, we're going to talk about the adjacency and building layout feedback that you gave to us tonight. We're going to work on the diagram and give you an updated version so you can see how it's morphed and changed. That'll be the first update. That'll be my reporting back on the design team. The second thing will be a discussion of building volume studies and the preliminary building systems discussion. And so that's 2 very different things. The building volume studies will be how big is it? What shape is it? Maybe what kind of roof does it have? How does it look in 3D? You know, where's the big part of the building? Where's the small part of the building? That kind of thing. What does the courtyard feel like? And so we'll be showing some 3-dimensional views of the building. They'll be preliminary, but they'll be 3-dimensional sketches. And then the building systems discussion will bring our mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineer into the conversation and begin to talk about how the building will work. We've talked so far about what the building looks like. You know, is it a zebra? Is it a tiger? Is it a house cat? You know, kind of like what shape is it? But we need to talk now to push the anatomy metaphor a little bit further about, you know, what its circulation system is, you know, what's muscles and bones and things look like. So what kind of structure does it have? What kind of mechanical system does it have? What kind of plumbing system does it have? And so forth. And we have some ideas that we're going to share with you on that. So that's the next meeting. And then the idea is 2 weeks later, we have another meeting where we do one final look. We say final because we're encouraging to move to the next topic, but a final look at the building layout and adjacencies. We incorporate comments that you had on the volume studies, and we give you a new version with comments on the volume studies. And then also feedback about building systems. So I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions about VRF, if you know what that is, or you know, an all air system for mechanical, whatever the peculiarities are of the building systems that we talk about. You'll have some questions and we'll bring feedback to you on those questions. And then we'll be presenting site amenities with SLR. We'll bring Mike Allegroni, Mike, it's not Allegroni, that's the construction company. Help me out, Dan. We'll bring Mike back.
Not Allegroni, I can tell you that.
It's not Allegroni. Aragoni. Sorry, Aragoni. We'll bring Mike Aragoni back. And we'll talk again about how our building layout that we're developing in our initial schematic design of the site begin to work together. and where's a good, if the mechanical system is here and the service door is there and our main door is here, how does that begin to affect the things we do on site? And where's the best place for the pickleball courts? Or what do you want? Pickleball courts, bocce, raised gardens, garden shed, all of those things. We'll talk about how the building breathes out into the site.
So that's a good question. It's a programming question. And should the building committee be deciding the programming of the exterior space, or should the preliminary come from Diane, from Terry, and then the results brought to the building committee for affirmation?
Are you asking me or George?
I'm asking Wilmington.
I would think that that would be a discussion I'd have with Terry and see what she would.
And then we bring it to the committee, and the committee either thumbs up or expands or thumbs down.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, we already know a lot of things that are out there. We've heard bocce, we've heard pickleball, we've heard, so we know a lot of that's going to be there, but that'll be
Ready to throw the Polini.
Yeah, and the Pauline, right?
I'm sorry, I'm back.
What that is. Some don't know what that is, Dan.
Some call it the
Diane,
jack.
you go.
I do. But doesn't Paul? Paul knows what that is.
Yeah. Okay.
So yes, we have a couple of weeks to get prepped for that, but yeah,
Right.
let's start those discussions. I just want to point out a third meeting. I want to think as far ahead as possible so that we have the benefit of planning ahead of us. In a month and a half, we'll get together and we'll begin to review the last week's meetings, the previous meeting, so site amenities and such, and then we're going to start digging into the major spaces of the building. What is the dining area actually look like? What specific things do we want in the arts and crafts room? How does the kiln work, for example, with everything? What kind of fitness classes do you do, and how does that fit? And what does that space start to look like? And so you can see we kind of we go generals to specific, and inside the building, and then outside the building, and then back in more specifically. So it's an iterative process. And then we begin, at that point, we should have the information back from the survey, the site survey, and we can begin to talk about how the site characteristics that we talked about in the previous meeting will begin to mesh with the realities of the site specifically, what opportunities we have, and what assumptions we've made are validated, and which ones we need to reconsider. So that's just a very, very brief look ahead.
I think what you did there, Lee, also inadvertently, is you jumped an agenda item that I had here.
Sorry.
No, that's perfectly fine, and I'm going to actually take it out of order since we discussed it. That would be item number 6. We talked about our meetings, so I'm not trying to get too far out on people, but the February 9th, the 23rd, and March 9th, you made it clear of our next steps, which I think is very good. One thing I want to ask of the committee and people that are here is just to avoid confusion, because I've heard from a few residents, and we know because we're trying to keep it clear, but when we're the Senior Center Building Committee and we start referring to the Town Hall School Admin Building Committee, or town hall topics or town hall functions, it confuses people out there because they see a lot of the same faces and they see a lot of the same things that are going on. So then they don't know which meeting they're watching. So I kind of like to keep it when we're talking about the Senior Center Building Committee, which we're on tonight, is that we kind of stay on topic with that.
George, we're going to buy Senior Center Building Committee hats for everybody.
Well, I actually think, to be honest with you, I think Lee should put a banner at the top of his all of his presentations that just says Senior Center Building Committee, so that on each slide, if someone tunes in, they can see what meeting they're at. And we'll ask Dietz to do the same on the town.
Well, and eventually we're going to be out of these remote meetings. We'll be back to in person. So, and they'll be filmed by WCTV. So it'll be the same thing. I just ask people to keep that in mind for the people that are at home watching it, that can't be there. or that are trying to, just keep up on town
The
meeting.
banner idea is clearly a good one, though. I think that should be adopted going forward for both groups.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
Yep.
I agree with that.
Yes, we can do that.
And,
Good
and Lee,
idea, Jim.
are you going to also bring back to us the placement of the building maybe being moved back a little as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Diane. Yes, as we get this building shaping up, we need to set it on the site again and make sure it still fits and make
Correct.
sure it's nudged in the right direction. Because we've just been talking about inside the building,
Mhm.
and then we're going to zoom out and we're going to put the building at scale onto that site plan and start nudging it around in the site plan and making sure that it still fits with its context, and then nudging around the context to make sure it fits. So it's going to go back and forth. We're going to zoom in and zoom out and zoom in and zoom out to make sure that everything is still jiving. We don't want to, become myopic and design an awesome building that doesn't fit on the site. So yes, we'll continue representing it to you in both characters.
Very good.
Is there a point, and it may be several meetings down the line here where, or maybe it's not even part of this particular process, that the exterior design of the building is, or there's discussion about the type of exterior design? I'm just thinking about this in terms of one, whether there's common features of the exterior architecture that we would want to have in this building and perhaps a future town school admin building, or whether they should be completely separate and distinct depending upon, I guess, the location and topography.
That's an excellent question and a really good segue, unintentionally. Yes, the answer is yes. I've listed, I shouldn't say this is a team process. We've listed, Dan actually came up with a fantastic way of saying, here's where we are. We meet every other week. That was last meeting. And he said, let's get all the way to August, I think it was, with our design process. And each meeting, every other week, we're going to tackle a different topic. So I've only given you a preview of 3 meetings, but you can see here, the 6-week look ahead only gets us to March. And this process is going to continue all the way to August. And so there are meetings beyond this that become more specific. There are meetings that talk about the outside of the building. There's going to be meetings that talk about the materials of the outside of the building, brick, wood, whatever. And then we're going to get to a stopping point because we're going to have enough information to do a schematic design estimate. And we're going to be at a point to say we have the schematics. We have schematic plan, schematic site, schematic materials. We have enough. We've cooked everything up to an even level. So there's some things that aren't overcooked and some things that are still raw sitting on the counter. Everything's cooked to an even level. And at that point, we can get a cost estimate and see where we are. And then that starts, hopefully everything goes great. And we go straight into the design development at that point. And that's when we really start saying, okay, this is the building. And we finish the design and document it. But yes, we'll get through all of that. So we'll have views of the outside of the building for schematic design. It will look like architecture when we get done with it this summer.
Thank you.
Very good.
If I may, George,
Go ahead.
I've just got a little bit of an extra here because we're thinking, like I said, it's chess. So we're trying to think as many moves ahead as possible. And we in the design team are starting to think about how we can relate this building architecturally. So Jeff, your question is perfectly timed. How we can relate this building architecturally to Wilmington. Now, I'm not from Wilmington. I'm from Maine, and I live in Western Mass. But some of these things sound awfully familiar to me about summer camps, Silver Lake, some of the historic architecture, because, Maine and Massachusetts used to be the same state a long time ago. So we share a lot in common. So this all sounds very familiar and looks very familiar. And so looking through these old postcards and some of the images that we got from the Historic Society and historic pages online, we're seeing some pretty fantastic and traditionally New England architecture. And this is what we find when we look at historic images is old buildings, and many of these don't even exist anymore, but they're fantastic. The railroad station in particular in the bottom right is just lovely. I know that's one Grant particularly likes. It's a beautiful stick style Victorian building. This is what we're beginning to cull out of the historic record that we find interesting. And there's something about this cottage house on Silver Lake, and as a destination, as a summer vacation spot, a place people would go for a few weeks, that speaks to the nature of how a senior center might be a place that people go to hang out, for respite, to read a book, a quiet place in the woods, that kind of connotation, a connection with the outdoors. And that's beginning to resonate for the design team. But I don't want to come up with the narrative completely ourselves. You know, I want this to be a collaboration between the board and the design team where we agree on a look and feel. So these images we find fascinating, but we want to hear more from you. We don't want to say it should be a wood building and it should look like this, and then you guys go, what? No, that's totally wrong. Even if it's a beautiful building, I don't want it to be the wrong beautiful building. So over the next few weeks, if you have images of buildings you like, and I know that you toured some senior centers and you took some photos, but they don't have to be just senior centers. None of these are senior centers. It's a train stop, it's a cottage. It's this is actually the big picture to the left, I think is it's a wonderful space that opens out onto a garden that I believe was part of the cottage house. If you have pictures that you feel are uniquely Wilmington, that spark your imagination, or pieces, buildings that you really like, we would love to see them, because we have an imagination. We can think of things that might look good, that might fit well, or that might make a strong statement about how we feel the building is going. But if you have ideas of how you think it should look and feel, or a story that you feel that this building is connected to, what Wilmington used to be, what it wants to be, we really need to hear that, because that's going to really make it real for us.
Interesting.
Food for thought. And if you think we're just wild and just completely off target, we need to know that too.
Don't be afraid to say you don't like it.
Yes, you won't hurt my feelings. It's going to take a lot more than that.
Right.
Okay.
Good.
I think that's all we have.
That was a lot. That was very good.
Very
Thank you.
good.
I really appreciate the conversation. Thank you all.
Nice
Lee,
job.
if we had those pictures, you have an email there that we could email some pictures off to you?
Absolutely. Dan Pilata at P3.
I mean, if you want to send them to me, I can make sure they get there too. If you guys want to send them to me, I'll send them out to
Oh,
Lee and
great,
Dan.
great, George. That would be great.
That way I can keep a collective.
Good.
Yeah, I think we should keep the communication moving through George and Dan. I don't want to forget anything, and I want to be accountable to you guys. So that's the
Absolutely.
best way to keep track.
All right. Next item on the agenda, Dan, OPM discussion on public outreach.
So you should be getting in your water bill a notice about both projects. I don't want to mix the two up, so you'll get a notice about the senior center project on one side. We'll probably do another newsletter after this meeting, because it's clear that the building's starting to formulate, and I think it'll be important for people to see the progression of some of these images. So we'll write up another one for editing and distribution over the next week. So by the end of next week, we'll have another one out the door. So from that standpoint, it's good. I think that once we've got some elevation styles done, which is probably going to be sometime in middle or late March, I'm guessing, we probably should have the public forum, because usually we get a lot of interest from the public on what a building looks like, and what the floor plan is. And by then you'll have both of those to the point where if public comment comes in, they can be changed. Like if the public really hates what this committee's doing, you'll hear it, and it's not a big deal to change it. So I think that would be the good time to be doing that, and we can coordinate that with the Board of Selectmen if they want to host it, or with this committee if you want to host it, or however you want to do it. But that's about when a real, true public forum on a project like this would go.
Dan, when did you say that you're suggesting?
Kind of like I'm thinking late March, early April.
Okay.
I know you've got town meeting special in March, in early March, and you probably have your annual in late April, right?
Yes.
April 30th.
Well, I'm kind of thinking between the two sometime. Because I don't know whether you guys do reports at the annual town meeting. It'd probably be a good idea also as part of public outreach to make sure that we have a report for the town meeting.
Yes, absolutely.
So, because they voted the warrant article, they should see where the warrant article went. So that's what I have, George.
All right, very good. Also, Terry and myself have done some recording with WCTV. I know it's in the editing stage, so it'll be getting out pretty soon.
George, could I?
We also have pictures of the existing conditions that we're working on, even another newsletter of both projects.
Absolutely. Diane, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. So on this next newsletter that's coming out for the senior center, specifically, what were we going to focus on again? Could you just repeat that?
Well, what I got out of the request for public outreach, Diane, was that, if we had a meeting and the meeting had something of substance, we should try to get it out so that people could follow the progression of the project. Today, we talked about the grouping of spaces and the grouping of adjacencies, and that can be explained in a simple one-page newsletter with a couple of graphics. And I think you'll find that people will follow, so that as the plan develops, they can follow the plan develop. It won't be such a shock when we get to the end.
Yeah. Do you think some sort of preliminary, you're going to have the St. Dorothy site, some sort of preliminary building on it so that people can kind of get some visualization, or is that too far ahead?
We don't have that.
Okay, we don't really have that.
What we have right now is a grouping of spaces.
Right.
We have an interaction with the building committee saying that we want to make sure that there's easy access. We want to make sure that there's south sun orientation. We want to make sure that the mechanical space, works in conjunction with the kitchen space. So we have some things that we got out of this meeting, and I think that the public should know that you're doing your job.
So then the article, would consist that we're focusing on the programming and the space needs to fit those programming and talk about what we're looking at, a fit room,
we're going to talk about the adjacencies that the programming has determined.
Okay.
So,
because I think it's important for people to understand, well, why did you build this room? It came around the programs and this is why. I remember at the last meeting, Jeff said something about the who, where, or why. Was that what you were talking about, Jeff, explaining to the people, or was that?
It was talking about multiple the phases of it.
Yeah, I think there's multiple phases to the communication. Why are we doing this? Why is this necessary? What's happening here? What is the design? And then how are we going to pay for this?
So the pay for it part is delicate because we don't know what it is. But, we can dabble into it that it's expected to be, within, say, however you want to word that, I guess would be within savings and within the levy limit. The why, you can't see this, but we are starting to take pictures of all of the And George has been doing videos of some of the reasons as to why these buildings are tired and old and need to be replaced, and why they functionally don't work. It's a difficult thing to do. The why part, you guys live in the buildings every day, so you see it. The average person, it has to be part visual and part descriptive, and we're working on that. It's not as easy as you think, because it'll come back to bite you if what you write can be disputed. And, you know, so what? It's 65 years old. Big deal. My house is 112 years old. That's not a reason to replace it. So it's intertwining the real needs, the programmatic needs, and the deficiencies in structure and systems all together in that one why newsletter. Of why we're moving forward and why you as a town voted to move forward. So we're getting there. We're almost there. We're not quite there yet with that one, Diane. We are truly trying.
Yeah.
I think another,
I think the terms that we have to use so that the people understand are terms that they can understand. We use this word adjacencies. I'm not so sure the townspeople understand what the term adjacencies mean. You know, let's keep the language really layman-like so that they can understand. You know, we're developing these programs, and we've then developed these blocks for where these programs are going to be fitted. You know, on that idea, Dan, you know,
I hear you. I hear, as Lee would say, I hear your message.
Yeah.
I hear your message. Don't overcomplicate it with long words. Make it simple.
right.
And
I think also if people are following us, they will understand, and then they'll know exactly what we're speaking about.
I think they're going to be able to follow from the beginning to the end by the time
I
we're
think
done.
so.
Okay.
I agree
And you'll
with-
send that out prior before, you know, just for us to
Oh,
take-
no, we'll send it out and make sure it's proper.
Okay, good.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Greg.
thank you. I just wanted to compliment the OPM and our town IT director. I really appreciate the newsletters have been front and center, I think, the last couple of weeks, and there's been much more public awareness in a number of different mediums online, including some videos that I know have been filmed. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Selectman.
one of the things I think we also need to be prepared to address, certainly not at this in terms of this next newsletter going out, but with respect to the building, be prepared. We need to be prepared to explain why it needs to be new construction as opposed to renovation.
I expect that we will be doing that, Jeff, when we get the estimate, because the estimate is going to have a square footage amount to it, and we know what it'll cost to renovate a building such as you have existing down there and adding to it. So, I mean, I'm expecting that we're going to do at least a financial analysis of that. We're just not there yet. I mean,
Right.
I can tell you that when you look at a MSBA project, for example, it's one of the steps you have to do. Almost always, new jumps ahead of renovation, unless the building is, in really good shape. And the Bazell Center, although George has done a really nice job making it habitable over the last few years, it has a lot of deficiencies that are subsurface that to correct would drive the cost greater than building new space.
I kind of disagree, Jeff, that we need to even go into renovation versus new. I mean, after all, let's not forget that was brought up on the town meeting floor about an amendment on renovating the existing, and it went right down the tubes. So, the new part took place and went through completely. I think we're kind of opening up a Pandora's box again and going backwards
Diane,
instead of
I
forwards.
think, I believe that people, that's a question that people might need to have asked. So, to be
Answer.
fully transparent, that is something
I-
that we want to throw out there, even though I don't agree with, adding on to the building, we've done that with the old high school, we've done that with other buildings in town. But I think that's a question that would be asked and we would need to answer. And I think it would come out obviously that the new construction. So I think that's something that will be asked and we should be able to answer.
Well, with the population.
Just so you understand,
Right, exactly.
as soon as we touch that building, everything has to be brought up to code.
Correct.
And believe it or not, that includes seismic. That
Right.
is not gonna
Fieldstone foundation, crawl
Yeah,
space.
foundation's not gonna pass. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that we could talk about intelligently at town meeting if that question comes up. We're just not there yet until we get the numbers on the new school, so we have something to compare it to.
Absolutely. Okay.
Okay.
All right, before I go to the next, out to public comment, is there any other discussion or anything a committee member wanted to ask? Andrew, do we have anybody from the public?
We do not.
We do not. Okay, thank you. All right, if there's nothing else.
I'm sorry, I couldn't unmute myself, George, just for 1 second. Actually, I did get a question, and that was, but you had already answered it. The people concerned about, I did get a call of concern about just talking about the senior center itself. But again, you already had gone through that. I think they're probably were very well satisfied in hearing that tonight. So I do appreciate that you answered it even before I had to ask.
Oh, you mean about discussing the two different committees during the.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I think Dan made a good point too, as well. When we're talking about the senior center, that be put on the slide and, so that people know we're just talking about senior center and we're not talking about both. But they see the same faces at both, George. You're absolutely right. And I can understand the confusion.
My expectation, hold off for a second, hold off, Dan, is that now that we have our site selection behind us, because we were all talking the same thing at every committee, which one, who's going to pick this site? And we're all talking the same site. So now that we finally got through that site selection process, I think that we will be, more, focused on our individual committees.
So I do think that as a town, you might want to consider branding the projects by color, because you're going to add a third starting on February 2nd. So it's going to, some of the same people are going to be on 3. So it may get even a little more confusing. So you might want to somehow segregate by color or something, so everyone knows that the red project is one and the blue project is one and the green project is one. Just a thought. We find that when we segregate stuff by colors, it works really well with people that are, instant gratification.
Okay.
Just a thought.
I might put dibs on blue just because it's our company color. I don't know if I
Wilmington color too.
I'll let Teach know blue's out.
Maybe we'll all wear t-shirts. Senior center.
I
I'm
can
gonna buy you guys 3 hats: a red hat, a green hat, and a blue hat.
Jeff's idea will have senior center committee on one hat, swap them around. Okay. All right, with that, last item on the agenda, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, Diane Allen made the motion, Greg Bendel second. I'll take a roll call vote. Again, Diane Allen,
Yes.
Paul Malorani,
Yes.
Jack Holloway,
Yes.
Lisa Manganelli,
Yes.
Terry Marciello,
Yes.
Greg Bendel,
Yes.
and I, George Hooper, yes. All right, very productive meeting.
Everybody, thank you, Lee.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
Lee.
very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
To everybody.
Great
Absolutely.
presentation.
Thank
Thanks
you.
to Grant as well. Huge help for the presentation today. So thank you all. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to our next meeting.
Great. Andrew, thank you for everything.
Thank you.
And Rebecca, send us a thank you for taking the minutes. Have a
Thank
good
you,
night.
everybody. Good night.
Take care,
now.
everyone.
Good night.
Right.
Good
Right.
night. Thank you.